So I just got here from the Hill. It's been kind of a late night, and I have to say that seeing everybody here, I'm reminded of the well of hope I felt when the Bowles-Simpson Commission was first appointed and when it nearly got enough votes to send something to the floor. Because it feels like we are at a nadir right now, to be honest with you. The president did meet tonight with House Republicans, as you probably know. They're talking about a plan to raise the debt limit through Thanksgiving, which everybody who is covering this is really happy about because it'll ruin another holiday. The president wasn't wild about the idea. He's like, I really want to have the government reopened before I'll talk to you about anything. And Republicans, on the other hand, are like, they're playing this weird balancing game between the very far right wing, who doesn't want to give up on the idea that they're going to keep the government shut down and get rid of Obamacare, because that's happening really quickly now that the government is shut down. And, trying not to actually default, because they do, in fact, think that would be a bad idea. So I have no idea where this is headed right now. I mean, it does seem to be a really encouraging sign that Republicans in the House, as well as the Senate, agree that October 17th is a deadline they don't want to blow. Everybody seems very concerned that if they did blow past it, either the markets wouldn't tank and therefore conservative Republicans would never vote to do anything else with the debt limit, or markets would tank and then they would lose all their leverage. So it's a very confusing time for everyone, I think. But what does seem clear is that there is really no large discussion about the big things that the Concord Coalition and Simpson Bowles and Rivlin Domenici have dedicated themselves to, which is why it sort of feels like, the possibilities that we all felt, I think, at the end of 2010 have really just, collapsed. And I think if we come out of this, when we come out of this, it will be a deal to keep the lights on and to keep paying our bills and to just do the most mundane things government is supposed to do. And it does not feel like the energy is there to do anything very dramatic, except maybe replace some of the sequester cuts and, maybe repeal the medical device tax, which would increase the deficit. But so this is the happy news I have to bring you. And the other thing I should mention is there's nothing to learn. Everything is playing out in public. There are no secret talks. As Boehner said the other day, there probably is a back room, but there's nobody in it. It's very unlike these other moments when you did feel like there was a possibility that they would address large issues. It's just that they got almost there and then didn't quite make it. So this time, it doesn't feel that way. It feels very sad. And I guess the thing that I would ask you guys to discuss first of all is why you think this is happening. I mean, we did have this...
It's me. Shh.
We did have this conversation going about 3 years ago now where people were confronting large issues, and I'm wondering if you feel like this is primarily a failure of leadership in the parties, or if there are, larger structural and cultural issues at work that have left us so polarized that these questions can't be breached. You want to start, Alice?
Can I start? Anybody here? I think it's all of the above, Laurie. We have had changes in our political system. The primaries have given us much more polarized candidates. We've had a general discouragement with life because we had this terrible crash in '08, which we need not have had, but the economy has recovered so slowly that everybody thinks that must be somebody's fault. So I think there's a lot of reason for anger and discouragement. But I am just as mystified. I do think it's a failure of leadership, both in the Congress and in the White House, that you look nervous.
Your mic.
Got to do something about it? It's on.
Give her a new mic.
It's falling down.
Testing.
Okay, is that better?
No.
Yes, no, maybe. Better?
I can hold it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'll be better.
We've had a failure of leadership, both in the White House and in the Congress. I'm a strong Obama supporter, but I'm mad now. It isn't just that Pete has convinced me. It seems to me that this could be the moment that the president took charge and said, we've got to change the conversation. We shouldn't be talking about the debt ceiling. We shouldn't be talking about shutting the government. We shouldn't be talking about cutting discretionary spending anymore. We've done that. We did more than the Simpson, Bowles, and Domenici-Rivlin commissions recommended. We can't even run the government on what we have as discretionary spending now. We shouldn't be talking about defunding Obamacare, but we do need to get on the long-run problem. It's still there. It isn't quite as bad as we thought in 2010 for a number of reasons, partly because we cut the discretionary spending. But here I, the president, have got a plan and I'm going to put it on the table and invite the Congress to work with me on it. And we all know what's in that plan. It should have entitlement reform, well structured. It should have Social Security. It should have tax reform that raises more revenue over time. None of this has to phase in very quickly, but it can be legislated. And I don't understand why the president isn't saying that.
Let me first say, I thought that I was going to say that this crowd really didn't stay here because they expect us to say something meaningful tonight. They would be satisfied if we adjourned right after that great steak that you got from out west. But frankly, it was worthwhile already, because I listened carefully to Alice Rivlin when she just talked, and I have to say a couple of things to all of you. You ought to listen to what she said, because had there been one more speaker who spoke attributing the problem that we've got to the Republicans, I would have, for the first time publicly, said that the president was as much at fault as any Republican around, because he has not led this country. And right now he's not leading us, and we're not going to get anywhere without it. We're going to work around the edges like we've been and have people talk about how much we've saved and cut when we haven't done anything. The truth of the matter is that these have been years that we have gone backward in terms of America's future, because the two things we need are very simple, and everybody agreed: a tax code which is growth-oriented. Without growth orientation in the next fiscal policies, our youngsters have no chance, not only because they'll have to pay bills, which they never expected, but we won't have a big enough economy to accommodate to their desires and needs. There's just no doubt about it. Where is the president on that issue? He talks about it, but he doesn't submit anything. Then the next issue is, we know what entitlements are, and they're not getting any better. And Alice said something very quietly that you ought to hear. She said we don't have to do anything very quickly. That's right. Everybody wants to scare the seniors to death like we're going to transform their policies next month. We need to do it over 10 years, just so we put them in place and show the recipient public and the economic activists that we're doing something about it. Now, I tell you again, you can't do it without a president. So Mr. President, I hope you work out something tonight. I hope your helpers help you work out something, but unless you lead, it's going to be another solution that is half-baked, that permits all sides to claim some kind of victory, and we really get nothing. Now, I want to close because that's too grumpy for me. And what I really wanted to say, that Bob Bixley looks terrific since I have talked him into getting haircuts.
That's true. Not that I look terrific, that he talked me into getting haircuts.
And you look much better at it, because I want to thank you for having us tonight and permitting us to discuss here. I myself have said so much that if I find myself out in the hallway and then waving down a cab if you go on too long, just understand that I've gone back to my old days. I really think I'm chairman and that I'm going to dictate to everybody and I'm going to have my way and leave, right? But none of that's true. As long as you say things meaningful and impartial, I'll stay as long as you'd like.
I just have to say one thing. When we were doing the Domenici-Rivlin Commission, I do remember one particularly long day, and it was getting around, a certain point, and Chairman Domenici said, "This meeting is going to come to an end. I like you all very much, but I don't want to see you anymore."
Well, I subscribe to what Alice said, what Pete said. Before I comment on the substance of the question, though, Paul Zongas, Warren Rudman, and Pete Peterson formed this organization. Sometimes it's very hard to measure progress when you're talking about fiscal matters, but I do believe if we ever do get a real agreement that puts us on a fiscally sustainable course, that Concord Coalition would have played one huge role. So I know Pete's not here tonight, but Kristen is here representing the Peterson Foundation. So thank the Peterson Foundation, and all of us, I think, can be grateful to the leadership of Warren Rubin and Paul Zongas. I really don't have much to add in terms of what Alice said and what Pete said. I'll just comment by saying that many years ago, Will Rogers, the famous comedian, was asked what he thought about the congressional philosophy. He said, well, it's pretty simple. That philosophy, and this I think still applies today, is if stupidity got us in this mess, why won't stupidity get us out? I think the deal is there to be made. It's not physics. It's not calculus.
No.
It's arithmetic. It's adding, it's multiplying entitlements times the number of people that are not only in being now, but that will be in being and eligible for those entitlements. And it's putting those programs on a sustainable course, which means not cutting, but bending the curve from that way to about that way. John, you said it before dinner. Bending the curve is what we're talking about, and we've got to have a way of communicating so that people understand that. Pete said 10 years. I would say probably doing it over 20, 30 years. I think that's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
These entitlement programs take a long time. I was talking to two military officers, top officers, and both of them said to me, I didn't even bring it up, this was in the last 3 days, they both said, we've got to do something about military retirement. We're drawing more than we should be, and we're not paying as much for medical care as we should. And he said the military leaders are going to have to take the lead on it. We're going to have Americans step up to the plate, because we do have to change. I think we're going to have younger people. We're going to have to say honestly to the younger people, you're not going to have the same exact benefits that your father and your grandfather have had and mother. And we've got to do something for those young people, though. We've got to give them a chance to save more money on their own. And we've got to have economic growth. If we don't get economic growth, then all of this is just an academic exercise. You've got to reform the tax code. You've got to have a pro-growth tax code. If you do, all of these problems become more manageable. So it's not a mystery. We know what needs to be done. President Obama knows what needs to be done. He's a smart man. John Boehner is a smart man. He knows what has to be done. So it's not a mystery. We're going to have some people who lead, and we're going to also have some people who follow, and we're going to have members of Congress who step up to the plate and explain it to their constituents. Most of all, we're going to have the electorate step up to the plate, because people right now are getting elected by saying they will not compromise, they will not work with the other side, and they're winning elections that way. So is it any mystery that when they get to Congress, or when they don't work together? We've got to have people who say they're going, in both parties, who say they're going to Washington to work with the other party and to solve problems. Right now, if you're not making the zealots in each party angry, then you're not representing America.
The problem with that.
That's good.
And there's not a word been said that I don't agree with. And I think you and I agree with the essence of the thing. The problem is that we have allowed the two parties, and I've been a leader in this one side anyway, to ease into this unholy alliance where I give you the Democrats and you give me the Republicans, and neither one of us has a general election problem.
Yep.
So our nomination, our election, is based upon the single issue or the ideologues in our parties. And it doesn't affect the senators directly immediately, but sooner or later that bleeds into the Senate as well.
Yeah.
I don't want to overemphasize that, because I do think that it is really important that we start reforming the process by which we redistrict this country. I think it is a fundamental imperative that we change it, whether it's the California plan, or Midwest, Iowa, or Florida, whatever. We've got to get away from that system that drives these. You might say something about the extreme. That's all right.
Yeah.
Both parties are now very much at threat and under threat. Campaign finance laws, by the way, haven't made any better. But I don't want to draw back from something that's, I think, important, that we lose when we come down on the Congress as if it was monolithic. The great majority of members of Congress in both parties are honorable, decent, caring, pretty close to the center, much more so than we give them credit for being. The great majority of them really do have some friends on the other side, really would like to work. They're at risk because they get crucified by their own leadership for getting out of line. Okay, that is a leadership problem. And it's a very serious problem. But I just can't stop without saying, Sam, if we're going to do what, you and I could write this solution in about 20 minutes. These two already have. It's not hard to do. Two people in this room could do it. We know we've got to solve the immediate problem for the Democrats by giving them a little bit of relief on the sequester, maybe some spending on infrastructure. They know we've got to deal with entitlements. We have to have tax reform. You've got to create a growth process. But there's only one person in this country who has the bully pulpit, the authority, and the responsibility to tell the American people the truth. That is the President of the United States. And that's not being done. We're not saying to everybody, we're part of the problem. All of us. We've got to put some stuff on the table. There's got to be specific. It cannot be any more of the good words, we got to get together and all that kind of stuff. Baloney. We need a president who will be the president.
Bob, I want to make one observation because you all have really pricked my brain, and thank you all for it. Actually, I yearn for the day when we had the two-party system. I mean, we used to catch all kind of complaints about Republicans and Democrats being too partisan, but the country was served well during large periods of time when we had two formidable parties. They knew who their leadership was. They knew when they're supposed to work together. They knew when they could work alone. And boy, is that disappeared. Whatever has happened in my own state, you can't figure out who's going to get elected to what anymore because of the primary system, and it's all messed up. It's all across this country. Republicans don't know, the leader of the Republicans don't know which people are Republicans and which aren't. So I would agree that this is a difficult era, but I also would agree, and we would hope to do better from the standpoint of the parties and in the electoral process. But nonetheless, difficult times for a great nation require that somebody lead the public. And that's where we've been short for the past X number of years. And it's got to get fixed. Let's hope we can last until we can get it. I hope so.
You know what strikes me too is lack of trust. I mean, and maybe it's because there's people that don't have experience working with one another, but it's getting to the point where some of these things don't seem to be coming together, or deals that seem obvious aren't coming together because the people that need to make them stick don't have personal relationships, don't trust each other, and there is not that institutional. And that goes for staff as well as the members. You know, some of the Bill Hoaglands and Steve Bells and the people that would make those sort of deals working with their colleagues on the Democratic side have left, and there's a much more contentious atmosphere on the Hill. I know we tried to have a bipartisan meeting of staff, and people were very leery about doing it and didn't want to. It's like, you know, having to hide out somewhere and afraid they were going to be seen going into a room with a staff member of the other side. And so that concerns me too, is that even and that may be helping to lead to this sort of legislative malpractice that's going on right now. I mean, there's you know, you have people taking ironclad stances that are fundamentally incompatible, and if nobody compromises, then from what I can tell, the government will remain shut down and unable to pay its bills forevermore. So, you know, if you assume that that isn't going to happen, something else has to happen, and there has to be some sort of a compromise, but the way that they're going about it is going to make it look like somebody has backed down, and that's going to be politically suicidal. So you know, what happened today I was thinking would be a good thing because it was kind of fuzzy, and, you know, everybody could sort of claim victory in something. And if they managed to pull defeat from the jaws of victory on this thing, I just don't know. We may be shut down for a long time with the debt limit.
Well, I forgot to mention the happy part of today is that Senator Mitch McConnell has waded into the fray for the first time since the stalemate began. And there are talks between the parties going on in the Senate right now on a totally separate track that would raise the debt limit for as long as 3 months. It would do a CR and sequester levels for as long as a year. The Democrats have some problems with it, but everybody is talking in the Senate, and it's starting to look as if, you know, we'll at least get out of this crisis once again, because the Senate, level heads in the Senate prevailed over the lack of leadership everyone seems to think is emanating from the White House and the complete chaos that exists in the House of Representatives. But I wanted to play devil's advocate a little bit on the president's role in this thing and the degree to which he deserves blame, which as a reporter I of course have no opinion on. But I'm wondering, there was a moment when he almost seemed like he was trying to lead on these issues earlier this year, after the fiscal cliff debate, when we finally saw concrete proposals for tiny little entitlement reforms, CPI, means testing in Medicare. I mean, he put things in the budget, and the reaction from the Republican Party was, man, we don't want to, what? You want to talk about entitlements after we've been telling you for 2 years we want to talk about it? Why would you want to do that? So I'm wondering if you don't see, you know, a surprising unwillingness on the other side of the aisle to talk about the issues they say they want to address.
Look, none of us are without sin.
What did you say the last part of your statement? I didn't get it.
I was just really struck that Republicans, particularly in the House, didn't even want to have the conversation about Medicare means testing and CPI. I mean, we could have a whole seminar on what's been done to that very modest reform.
Democrats didn't like it either.
Democrats I mean, Harry Reid, tanked the thing.
That's right, tanked it. Just to be fair, Paul Ryan this week came out with a statement, and he picked up everything that Obama had suggested. He said, we're for it. We'll go. And this is a leader in the House saying, we will take the Obama proposals, carte blanche, on the Medicare, on the Social Security, the whole thing, and zip. That's the problem. And Bob, it's more than trust. There's something that's scaring people in this town about taking a position on anything where they say, this I will do. I'd like to start a movement. And I'll stop talking. I'd like to start a movement to defeat anybody who says, I will never. I don't care what it is. I will never. You shouldn't be in politics. You shouldn't be in government. Those absolutist statements drive me crazy. And I don't care who makes them. Sorry.
I think the president may pick up on the Ryan. No, I don't know that. But that's just happened. I mean, I just read Ryan thing. Maybe he said it before, but I just read it in the last 2 days.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing about this debate, it got off with Ted Cruz in the Senate on the question of repealing Obamacare. And frankly, everybody, I think, in town knew that wasn't going to happen.
That's right.
And so instead of talking about entitlements, instead of talking about growth and tax reform, we were talking about repealing Obamacare. And I think it's badly flawed and needs a lot of work, but it's not going to be repealed, not as long as the president's sitting in presidency. So I think that got off to a bad start. But I'm a little more encouraged. I mean, as soon as I saw a lot of negative headlines after John Boehner appeared on the talk show Sunday, but what he said indicated to me that he was really getting ready to step up to the plate for some serious discussion.
Yeah.
And so, I have been told inside sort of the story of how he and Obama almost put together a deal about a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And it fell apart right at the end because of pressure on both parties from the wings. So I'm not entirely discouraged, but I must say my starting points are pretty low. I'm a little more encouraged than I was a week ago. I also think, I don't know whether Alice, you and Pete and Bill and Bob would agree, but I really think it's easier to make a big deal than a little deal.
I do too.
Well, it's just as easy.
I really do.
I think if you've got a big deal, people feel like everybody's got, is giving a little bit.
The problem.
Little deals are harder to make. And so I don't expect a big deal this week or early next week, but I do think if they get 30 days or 60 days, they can put together a big deal and make people feel that, look, we're now moving right. We've got sustainability, we've got growth coming, and we're going to curb the growth in entitlement programs. Everybody knows those things have to happen.
Oh.
So I'm not entirely discouraged. I'm more encouraged than I was 2 weeks ago.
Well, I'm not totally discouraged either, but it seems to me everything I had to say this evening did not have to do with the next 2 weeks. I mean, we've been at this for a long time, and I don't know that you can put what I'm hoping for together in this crisis kind of atmosphere. But it does seem to me that if you've got enough time, Sam's right, and maybe the grand plan is not gone. Maybe it could be looked at. There's one last observation. One would have to actually look and see if the President of the United States is really for reforming Medicare or not. It's very questionable whether he, as part of his transformation of government, intends to reform the Medicare program to make it budget, whatever we call it, the words, capable or sustainable. I don't know, but I think that's a question that's one of substance, not one of leadership. What does he stand for?
Can I make one point? I think we should stop blaming, rule out the never, and rule out anybody who talks about whose fault it was.
Thank you.
And right now, everybody hears that. When I said the president should leave, Larry heard, you're bashing the president. And maybe it wasn't as much his fault. I didn't actually blame the president. I think this is his moment.
I agree.
To
Well, you did say you were mad,
to
Alice.
see, well,
Well, who's not?
but the point is, this is his moment to lead. And we've got to get over this, whose fault it was that we got to this point. But the other point is, the only way out of this, it seems to me, and I've never run for public office, is a serious coalition of the moderates in both parties.
Yeah.
And everybody who, when you float something, says, oh, but the extreme liberals wouldn't accept that, or the Tea Party wouldn't accept that. I think we have to decide they're irrelevant. There's a majority in the middle,
That's right.
or at least we think there is, that can pass a sensible set of proposals that we could decide on this platform. And we've got to at least test that.
What do you think the odds are at this stage of the game that the Obama administration actually is interested in major entitlement reforms? I mean, one of the very first things they considered when they first took office was Social Security, tackling Social Security. That moment passed us by, and I now wonder if there's really any interest.
Oh, but the Social Security reform doesn't even have to be major.
No.
There isn't a lot wrong with Social Security that can't be fixed by tinkering around the edges with the benefit formula, making it a little less generous at the top, changing the tax structure a little bit gradually.
CPI.
Doing the CPI reform, but protecting low-income people and all of us older folks, the really older folks. That set of plans, which were in all of the proposals, are not radical at all.
No.
If your question is, would the
Do you see it in the next budget, I guess is what I'm asking.
The Obama administration, I think, would go for it if they thought there was support. But Dick Durbin, who is one of my heroes on the Democratic side, has proposed a Social Security, new Social Security Commission. And with a short time frame. My first reaction to that was, oh no, not another commission. But I think that is probably a good idea. A bipartisan short term, let's fix Social Security, not part of the budget,
Yeah.
just fix it.
And do you guys feel like any of you gentlemen feel that the atmosphere is conducive to such a thing? I mean, it feels as if trust has, you're right, it's not trust, it's just, it feels as if there is no energy on either side of the aisle to address these big issues at this moment. And I'm wondering if you see, who you see leading this, if you see someone there in office at this moment who could actually push this forward.
Look, Dave Camp and Max Baucus have been working for years on a really important tax reform. I think if you put it to both houses, it would pass. I really do. They say they haven't tweaked it.
But they've got to be able to report out the right kind of tax reform.
We do tax reform, you've got the nexus of a bargain coming. Then you can move to Pete's point on Medicare. It's going to take a while before we get to the health Obamacare because it's so poisoned right now. But there are enough things on the table to get to what we were all talking about, which is a bigger deal. The hardest thing in the world is to do a little deal because you don't get enough to go home and claim credit. You get a big deal, everybody's got a piece of it that they can take home. And we got to start thinking that way. That's why I love what Paul Ryan did, because Paul has given us a route for at least the Republicans to live with. I think the president can. You got the Max Baucuses of the world, you got the Lamar Alexanders and the Bob Corkers and the Durbins that are just looking for an opportunity. They don't want to see this anymore. They're worn out.
Well, I'll give you my version of whether there is. I believe it could be done. If they extend the debt limit long enough, if it's just 15 days, forget it. But if it's 6 weeks, 12 weeks, and who would lead it? there is no question the President of the United States would have to decide to lead it. And going in, he would have to decide, I'm for fixing the budget. I'm for fixing the debt. If that's not going to be the cornerstone, then we're back to little things, not big things, because that's the growth ingredient, without which we have nothing. And then you can ask that he also lead on the entitlement, yes or no. And if he decided to leave, it's not too late. The country has come up with strange things when we're in hard times. And the people of this country are absolutely, they feel put upon, walked over. They're just out of it. They're wrung out. You can't hardly take polls because people don't want to talk. They don't want to answer anything. But the president is the president, and he remains eloquent in his verbiage and what he says, so he might be able to.
Do you think, Pete, at a moment when they are so focused on a message aimed at rebuilding the economy and helping the middle class and struggling really to get the recovery in a stronger place, that you see any evidence or sign that this administration would steer that conversation towards the very difficult conversation you're talking about?
Well, I think I'm repeating myself, but in a little different way. I think there aren't 5 or 6 ways to get there. I mean, most people know, and we've already produced, Bowles has, we have, how you get where we have to go. So I answer it that seeing that and saying that's out there, and that is the tax reform that has growth oriented, that's get entitlements on a 20-year cycle, starting with 8 or 9 years getting a little tiny bit. And the sequester's got to go in any fix. It's just rotten. It's just terrible. But anyway, somebody could come up with those. And if the president wanted to lead, I actually believe there'd be a turnabout. But the question's been asked by 2 or 3 of us, where is the president? Forget about his leadership role. Where is he on the issue? It may very well be he wouldn't be on the issue.
But to give him one bit of credit, forgive me, Bob, but he did say he would support corporate tax reform.
He did.
We do have him on the record. That's
true.
the beginning point. Republicans are going to start taking yes for an answer, too.
That's true.
He's also said he would change indexing, too.
That's correct.
He said he'd change
Sorry.
indexing. There's nothing to keep a Democratic president and Republican leadership from going on television together and explaining the situation. And they do reach an agreement, and I think it will need explaining, because most people for the last 20 years have taken a program they don't like and said, well, if you just cut that out, that'll cure the deficit. If you don't like foreign aid, we'll get rid of foreign aid, that can solve the problem. If you don't like food stamps, get rid of food stamps, that solves the problem. And of course, that's just a little tiny drop in a big ocean. And so most people in this country still don't understand what are the driving forces behind
That's right.
not only the deficit now, but the bad indications for the future. And that's what people don't understand. The medical problem is not going to be easy. You're going to have to put some parameters around it. You're going to have to do it over time. You're going to have some transformative technology. And you're going to have some incentive systems that are different from what we have now. So it's not going to be solved quickly or easily. That's the hardest one. Social Security, I agree completely with Alice. And I think other entitlement programs, some of the retirement programs and so forth, a lot of those are going to have to be grandfathered. You're going to have to, everything we did, Les Aspin and I did on the military side, and all but one has been repealed since we left. But everything we did, virtually, you had to grandfather either 10 or 20 years. But when you get, because they accrue the funding, you start saving on a cash flow basis almost immediately. And right now, there's one little reform made in the military retirement. This shows you the compounding. We changed the retirement base from what was formerly the last day of service. That was the base of your retirement, what you would make, to the average of the last 3 years, which is what the civil service already had.
Huge change.
And right now, I'm told, don't hold me to the exact number, we had the grandfather for 20 years. I got it passed 3 times in the Senate. Finally, the House conference went along with it, with a 20-year grandfather on it. It's saving now like a couple of billion a year.
Yeah.
And
the new entitlements for the military are enormous.
Oh, huge. The same things happen in the military budget that's happening on the outside. And it's eating the lunch. It really is a threat to our national security. There's no question.
Exactly the same.
Yep.
It's going to turn around, and the principal funding for defense in the next 12 years is going to be for entitlements and personnel, not for the things we thought we were going to buy and keep strong.
Yeah.
It's already dedicated, we don't even know it.
When we went to the volunteer force in the 1970s, there was a Gates Commission. It wasn't Bob Gates, it was another Gates. The whole premise of the volunteer force was you're going to pay people a lot more, they're going to get much more comparable benefits, but you would change the upper out policy, which means you either get promoted or you leave, and you would change the retirement system. Guess what? And change any of it. So right now, you go in when you're 18 years old, you're in for 20 years, you're 38 years old, you live to be 80, and you draw retirement from the age 38 to the age 80 or 85.
Right.
So it's just impossible to sustain that. And guess what? The Joint Chiefs are now realizing it. That's the good news. The military leadership are now realizing that if they don't change that, they're not going to have a tank, a plane, or a ship.
That's right.
You know, they're going to be just basically paying retirement. So people are beginning to realize it. But I've thought for a long time, if you had the President of the United States right after an election and asked for the Republican leadership and Democratic leadership, the House and Senate, to get on television and not explain the solution to this, just the actual facts about the budget, what's driving the budget, and then say, we're going to choose up sides and we're going to fight about the solution. We want everybody to understand that we agree on the facts. That would do an enormous amount. Now, you can't do that right now, obviously, the atmosphere.
Well, I think there may be a moment coming where you could do that. I mean, I think that there's a certain yuck factor building, that everybody is getting so disgusted with the current. This is about the only thing, if you want to take some good out of the current public discuss, is that I think that it may lead to a reaction where responsible legislators may take an interest in legislating again, and so where the cool, edgy, contrarian thing to do will be a policy wonk, and some of these centrist coalitions will form and actually get something done. Because the revulsion with just the over concentration on partisan talking points is really, I think, I was in Senator Brock's hometown of Chattanooga this morning and talking to the Tennessee County Association county managers. Nobody I talked to, there weren't any partisan comments. It was a plague on both their houses, and we have to manage our budgets. We have to be responsible to our constituents. We have to get things done. We have to make deals, in a constructive way. And that was universally what everybody was talking about. And I think that that's reflected in the polls, these ridiculously low polls. So, I mean, if you're trying a strategy of pandering, and you're at 5% in the polls, why not try something else? Like coming together and legislating. So, I just would mention last year we gave our awards to the Cooper-La Tourette group. Now, they only got 38 votes, the great 38 last time. But, Alice mentioned, getting proposals that would draw bipartisan support and coalitions together. And I think that you can sort of build from that, and I think you could find some coalitions that might be able to develop, do the debt ceiling relief and try to get something together. I think there'd be a lot of people. Look at all the House, moderates, the Charlie Dent faction, I'll call them, who was one of our great 38 that we awarded the thing to last year. So, that maybe things are just so repulsive right now to the public, that it may provide that moment where something like Senator Nunn suggested would be very well received.
I want to caution you that lifetime in looking at politics and government, when we're at 5% or 10 or even 15 support for the Congress of the United States, the respect for the institutions in this country is at an all-time low. Now, if you want to get terrified, think about what that means. If the people of this country give up on its institutions, we're gone. It is not a matter of Republican and Democrat. When we've done things that have lost that much confidence and faith, we are at risk in ways we have not dreamed about that have nothing to do with debt. It's a big, serious problem, and it scares me to death. Sorry, I'm off the subject.
I agree with that. Let me interject a little bit of hope, and it has to do with healthcare costs, because we've all said that's the real problem for a long time, and that's the hardest thing to fix. But I think there's some fixing going on already. We have seen the rate of growth slow down. We're not entirely sure what is driving it. But if you work with healthcare providers, which is what I'm doing at the moment, you see that there's an awful lot of reform going on out there. And we are moving away from the fee-for-service system. And it's happening. It may not be as hard as we think. Government can nudge it.
Well, that gets me to a question I wanted to ask, and maybe you can all weigh in, and Bob, you as well, since you've done such a lot of work trying to raise awareness of these issues. And I'm wondering, what is the most... We've been fighting about this for 3 years now. We've been having crisis after crisis where we always say we want to do this big deal to resolve these problems. And I would like each of you to tell me, have you seen signs that the public does understand what these issues are about and is interested in addressing them?
Oh, yes.
I personally I think the quality of the angry emails I get have slightly improved. Nobody talks about cutting 4 and 8 anymore.
Well, I'll weigh in on that first. What we've found is when you get a bunch of people together in a room about this size, and let's say you were all given the Simpson Bowls or something like it, a lot of options, and you were each told that you were a special committee that was going to deal with these problems. And it had, some of those options and others in there that would, so there'd be something for everybody to fit all ideological stripes. And you were given a goal. By and large, almost all groups of ordinary citizens or student groups or some people that sit around and do these exercises work out their differences and feel very good about it. A lot of times people go into these exercises saying, I know the problem is X and, this is what I'm going to do. And they either find that they're marginalized, that the rest of the people sitting at the table don't want to talk to them. And a lot of them then come around because they don't want to be marginalized. And they make these compromises. And so I do think if you can get it out of a stark political setting, the underlying rationality of the American people comes through.
I don't go anywhere. I don't remember being in a speech or an event where the conversation wasn't, we can do this. We know what the problems are. We know what the solutions are. What we need is somebody to take the lead and say, we'll bite the bullet. But the public that I talk to is as on board as I can imagine. The contempt is for the system that let us have what we've got in terms of leadership. But the desire, the hunger, is very substantial. They're ready to vote, and they're not afraid to make the choices.
I should just add that people don't jump in if you say, would you like to have the Social Security eligibility age raised? They don't say yes. Or if you say, would you like to have your home mortgage interest deduction eliminated, they're not going to jump at that. That's why polls are misleading, because polls show like a surface instant reaction to these sort of things. It's the deliberation that comes after that, and are people willing then to make trade-offs once you get into a deliberation situation and realize that somebody from your hometown is sitting across the table from you that feels differently. And that's what I'm saying the American people are capable of doing, and that's what the political system is not providing us right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I believe the answer to your question lies in this way.
We can't hear you.
Here, I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
No?
that's better.
Well, that's all right.
He's on.
You've heard too much.
Hold it up, Pete.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah,
That better?
better.
Looks to me like the answer requires that we ask another question. How many times have any of us seen 3 national leaders, partisan, real leaders, 3 of them, get on television and say, American people, we want to tell you about our problems, and tell them the basic problem with special emphasis on our debt, and then further discuss, besides the debt, discuss the fact that there's a way to fix it that requires that we do A, B, C. Now, the problem is there have not been American leaders that agreed with that. It's all over the place. As a matter of fact, our president has been told by his own economists, almost in a fleeting manner, well, we don't have to do anything. The budget's under control. We don't have to worry about entitlements, because look here, and then they give you some answer that we're not that much in debt, even though we're not all dummies. Economics is also facts. And we sit around and find out that America's never been this heavily indebted, except after the Second World War, and we had a war to win. And we've never, in all the following years, done what we're doing in terms of our debt and having to pay it off. And look at the break we've got with the interest rate at 1% and 2%, because we're the only country that people want to invest in. But what's going to happen when matters come back to their regular self? But the point I'm making is leadership would require that a group of Americans do what Sam discussed and begin to sell the public. Then the question would be, after having been sold and told by our leaders, will the big middle of America agree to do these difficult things? And I tell you, I've never thought more strongly that they would, and that they are ready.
I think
they're all over the place. More leadership wants to join other leaders in trying to solve it. They feel pent up. They get in the clothes closet because they want to hide. Because I'm supposed to be working on this, but nobody wants to let me, so I just as well hide. That's exaggerated, but that's what we're feeling out there. That's how I see it.
Lori, I've got 3 minutes. Now we have a tradition at the Concord Coalition, which was established by Pete Peterson, who said that you had to end these things promptly at 9:30 because the audience will sit there pretending to be interested until about 9:30, at which point they will not, and you'll start to lose people. So Pete said that the first time he chaired a dinner in New York, he made an announcement at the beginning that this dinner will end promptly at 9:30, and he says that's the only standing ovation he's ever had. So we do end promptly at 9:30. If there's, we've got like about 2 minutes if anybody wants to, some urgent point that hasn't been made yet. Now is the 2-minute warning.
Thank you.
Concord is one of the most important things going on in this country. If you all are out front and we get a lot more like you, we can do it. But it can't be done just by wishing. And I honor you for that.
I just want to thank everybody who came and everybody who contributed. It's extremely important, extremely helpful. And Bob, to you and the whole Concord staff, some days I know it's frustrating out there, but what you've done, if we ever do have a sustainable fiscal policy, I think Concord will have been a major part of it. And I don't know whether Maya is still here, but I'd say the same thing about fix the debt and also the bipartisan committee. We have a lot of people, and these fiscal organizations are working together closer than ever before. And also, I also thank CSIS for the leadership. So a lot of people are working very hard on this. Alice, you and Pete, y'all did a terrific job. Terrific job.
Thank you.
So it's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, I too I too would like to thank Bob and the Concord Coalition, but for having me to moderate this event, but also because I found Bob to be, of everyone in Washington, the most apt describer of the chaos on Capitol Hill. When I'm trying to write a story about what's happening and explain to America why things aren't working out, I call Bob. So thank you.
Let me just end by saying I like to thank Lori for not writing in the paper some of the things that we talk about. Some of my apt descriptions wouldn't look so apt. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.